Starlink arriving in South Africa sounds like progress on paper. The idea of fast, affordable internet reaching even the most remote parts of the country feels like a long overdue fix for a nation still struggling with patchy connectivity and monopolized data pricing, right? People are understandably excited because internet access has become the new oxygen of economic life. Without it, you're locked out of education, jobs, and communication. But behind that excitement is a deeper concern that most people are not necessarily thinking about, which is who actually controls the network that would connect South Africans to the rest of the world. Starlink is not a local company. It is an American one under Elon Musk's SpaceX. Every byte of data that flows through it, every connection made and received, essentially travels through a system governed by another country's corporate and political rules. When you think about it in those terms, what looks like innovation starts to feel like surrender. Because while South Africans would gain world class internet speed, they would lose a layer of sovereignty. A nation that cannot manage its own data infrastructure eventually becomes a client state in the digital economy, dependent on others for both access and control. The issue becomes even more complicated when you look at the legal framework around how Starlink would have to operate in South Africa. For any telecommunications company to function here, it needs both a network and a service license. And that license requires that at least 30% of a company's ownership is in the hands of historically disadvantaged South Africans. That law exists for a reason. It is one of the few structural tools left that ensures some level of economic participation by Black South Africans who were deliberately excluded under apartheid. Starlink, however, has shown massive reluctance to comply with these terms, framing it as a barrier rather than a responsibility. This exposes the quiet arrogance that comes with global tech giants. They present themselves as liberators, bringing technology to the people, but they do not want to participate in the actual liberation of those people through ownership or economic inclusion. If the government bends these rules to make an exception for Starlink, it sets a very dangerous precedent where the promise of faster internet overrides the principle of national empowerment. South Africa cannot claim to be rewriting its economic story while simultaneously handing over its most powerful communication system to foreign interests. What are we doing here? The real danger here is not just about who owns the company, but about who owns the data. Internet infrastructure is not neutral. It is a system that collects, processes, and stores the thoughts, behaviors, and movements of a nation's people. If that system is controlled by a foreign company, then the data, the digital DNA of a country exists outside the country's jurisdiction. It means that the communication between citizens, the content they consume, or even the metadata that reveals their habits can be accessed and influenced or even monetized by actors beyond South African law. That kind of digital dependency is not freedom, it's exposure. When your country's online lifeline is run by an external power, your sovereignty just becomes symbolic. A nation that cannot guard its own data cannot protect its people from exploitation, manipulation, or surveillance. So while Starlink offers incredible speed and coverage, it also carries the quiet cost of control. It won't be visible at first, but it's deeply entrenched once dependence starts to set in. The technology will make South Africans more connected, but it might also make them more vulnerable than ever before. There's also a psychological and economic angle that is hard to ignore. South Africans are being conditioned to celebrate access rather than ownership, to applaud convenience rather than control. The narrative being sold is that technology equals empowerment, but that is only true when the technology belongs to you or at least operates under your laws. In this case, the excitement around Starlink reflects how desperate people have become for working infrastructure, even if it comes from the outside. But if foreign companies can bypass local empowerment laws by leveraging public frustration, then every sector of the economy becomes wide open for exploitation under the excuse of efficiency. Once the government starts bending its own policies for convenience, the principle of economic justice, the whole idea of correcting apartheid's legacy, begins to fade into token gestures. What Starlink represents is not just fast Wi Fi, it's the slow erosion of national agency disguised as modernization. The more South Africa outsources its critical infrastructure to foreign hands, the further it moves from self determination. The truth is that South Africa needs better internet, but not at the expense of its dignity or independence. Progress that strips a country of its control is not progress. It is a trade off that leaves people connected but powerless. The solution is not to block innovation, but to ensure that it happens on terms that strengthen the nation rather than weaken it. Starlink could absolutely operate in South Africa, but it should do so within the same framework every other company follows by partnering with and empowering local ownership. That is how you build access and accountability. Otherwise, the country risks becoming a digital colony where foreign corporations mine data instead of minerals now. Fast Wi Fi is useful, yeah, but if it costs South Africans their sovereignty, their data, and their economic inclusion, then it becomes another tool of dependency. A connected nation without control over its connections is not a free one. It is simply plugged into someone else's power.